Greetings, fellows from the internet. Today we're going to be discussing what the French revolutionaries did with religion, specifically civil religions, including the cult of reason, the cult of the supreme being, and Theophilanthropy. You know, people have this weird fascination with gore, with the drama of things, and I don't understand it. There's this particular fascination with the French Revolution. It's got all the hallmarks of gore, intrigue, overthrowing of a monarchy. What occurred in the French Revolution wasn't just a change in government, but a monumental revolution in society, down to the calendar and the religion. People were starving, and the government was running out of money. They had recently financed the American Revolution. Go figure, huh? So the king called upon the Estates General for the first time in a long time. Now, the king called upon the Estates General due to the financial situation. There were the three estates, the first estate being the clergy, the second estate being the nobility, and the third estate being everybody else, as the old saying goes. Well, the third estate didn't like the fact that they had one vote. They went to a fancy tennis court owned by the king and created their own constitution and the tennis court oath. One of the main things they wanted to tackle was religion, because the king got his legitimacy from the Catholic Church, so it was hard to criticize the church without also criticizing the king, and vice versa. The nobility, too, was also tied into the church, since younger sons of noble families would often become bishops. So they decided to make the clergy swear an allegiance to the state rather than to the Pope in Rome. This did not make the Pope in Rome very happy. Several hundred years earlier, they had fought a war against the Huguenots, so there really wasn't any other church apart from the Catholic Church in France at that time. Of course, there was distrust of the monarchy, and there were many deists and atheists that didn't think that this went far enough. So when King Louis fled, they accused him of treason, and this was the beginning of the Reign of Terror. They created a new constitution and a new republic. They also created the Committee of Public Safety. The Committee of Public Safety decided to dismantle the church and persecute any of those clergy who refuse to become part of the new state religion. Many of them believed that there was superstition in the old religion and that they wanted reason. Of course, this is called the cult of reason, since there is no real deity but reason itself personified as a female. These old churches were dedicated as temples to reason. These temples taught the morals that once were taught in the church, just without an actual God. One of the major proponents of the cult of reason was Jacques-René Hébert. He was a bit of a rebel rouser. He was a bit nasty. He loved to cause a ruckus. He married a former nun by the name of Marie-Francis Hébert, and she was defrocked, by the way. So that means she was basically thrown out of the convent and out of her ministry. The cult of reason represents that reason and virtue are the greatest attributes of humanity, and that there should be nothing else. They had many festivals. The cult of reason was represented by the goddess of reason. Now, by goddess, I don't think they actually worshipped her as an actual goddess. I think she was more of the personification of reason, because many of them were atheists. Now, this bothered individuals such as Maximilian Robespierre. Believe it or not, he actually was a agnostic in the sort. He actually believed in a deity. He was a deist. So he created the cult of the Supreme Being. During the control of the Committee of Public Safety, he actually had an actual parade where people lined the streets with the Republican colors of blue, red, and white. And he stood on top of a fake mountain with a column and proclaimed that the Republic shall be under the Supreme Being. Of course, this didn't go well with some people either, because there were many still secret Catholics who were afraid of the persecution, as they saw many of their priests and nuns essentially get slaughtered. I mean, this was evil what these people did. How disgusting. This next one I found the most fascinating. It was created during the French Directory. After the abomination of the Committee of Public Safety, there was yet another gap in civil religious realm of France. Theophilanthropy was created as a way to salvage civil religion from the catastrophe of the Reign of Terror. Theophilanthropy was the brainchild of Jean-Baptiste Clement de Pontis. I believe I pronounced that right. I probably just botched it. He published these ideas of new religion in 1796. He also was vehemently against the cult of reason and the cult of the Supreme Being, because they both kind of failed. And he highlighted the failures as one of the reasons for creating Theophilanthropy. This was a religion of nature. Unlike its predecessors, it was not an anti-religion, but a universal religion. Theophilanthropists believed that nature was the original religion and the origin of religion. If you asked me, I think nature is very spiritual, especially animals wearing bow ties. Let that one sink in for a minute. Because they believed that Theophilanthropy was a universal religion, they did not have a problem with other religions, because they believed that all originated and stemmed from nature. So in other words, they were very tolerant of other religions. Although Theophilanthropy did not last long, because Napoleon reestablished the Catholic Church as the religion of the realm. That's when all these martyrs killed by the Reign of Terror got their religion back. The newer version of Theophilanthropy was reestablished in 1885 during the Third French Republic. Strangely enough, this new version of Theophilanthropy lasted until the early 1900s. Having said all this, just because there's craziness going on in the big cities doesn't mean that small town people are just going to go along with it. Don't mess with the small town folk, especially with their religion. When it came to these religious restrictions, there was a major Catholic backlash throughout the countryside to these new religious reforms. One of the strongest parts of the resistance was from the Vendée region. So how do historians view civil religions in the French Revolution? More importantly, how do civil religions shape the view that historians have of the French Revolution? Well, Mona Ossoff published Space and Time in Festivals of the French Revolution in July 1975 by the Cambridge University Press. In this academic article, she talks about the renewed interest of historians and in festivals in the French Revolution. Festivals are inextricably linked to civil life in France, and they are also heavily tied into religion. The Catholic Church had festivals on the saints as well as on Christian martyrs. They also had feast days on both Christian martyrs and the saints. During the radical period of the French Revolution, they replaced these festivals to festivals of reason and honoring martyrs of the revolution itself. Mona further goes on to talk about how these festivals changed with the governments themselves. Commemoration of the Supreme Being to ceremonies glorifying the Directory. Speaking of Directory, I directed this entire video by myself. One of the biggest fascinations that historians have with these civil religions is that many of them were trying to be anti-religions. However, though they may have tried to be anti-religions, they just ended up as religions. They also engaged in iconoclasm, which means image breaking against Christian icons. But they just ended up replacing them with their own icons. Icons to the Supreme Being, icons to revolutionaries. They borrowed many practices from the church itself. It's like they wanted to completely remove religion, saying that it was superstitious, while replacing it with something that was superstitious. They wanted to get rid of religion, but they just ended up replacing it with another religion. Historic academics also talk about how deeply rooted religious beliefs are very hard to just simply erase. Other historians and psychologists point out how people need to believe in something bigger than themselves, regardless if it's Jesus, the Supreme Being, or reason itself. So on that note, when they tried to get rid of the Catholic Church and they tried to get rid of religion itself, they still had to end up replacing it with something that basically resembled religion. Sorry if I botched this next name. Frederick Schliermaker was one of those early critics of the Enlightenment, particularly on religion, for the same reason that the revolutionaries originally tried to remove religion and then instead replaced it with another religion. That was one of his main gripes with the Enlightenment thinkers. One of the other fascinations that historians have with these cults, especially with Theophilanthropy, is the universality of their ideas. That they were attempting to take ideas from religion itself and create a new universal secular religion. Also, unlike in the American Revolution, where they tried to have freedom of religion and separation of church and state, the French did the opposite, creating a new secular religion or religions depending upon what stage of the revolution we're talking about. This melding of church and state was exemplified through festivals. They would have festivals for many secular causes, such as the Festival of Agriculture. One of the more unique takes that historians have on civil religions in the French Revolution is that it shows what people believe can be malleable. So in other words, what people's beliefs are can be malleable and change over time, depending upon the circumstances. The fascination with the French Revolution stems from the fact that it is highly unusual for most revolutions. They not only wanted to change government, but they wanted to change society itself. They wanted to have a revolution of society down to the calendar and what people believe spiritually and religiously. In historiography terms, how historians view civil religions and their impact on the French Revolution is greatly changed over the years. In recent decades, there is more close examining of the cult of reason, the cult of Supreme Being, and Theophilanthropy in relation to the revolution itself. They made a much bigger impact than people realized in the past. Each of these civil religions wanted to replace the Catholic Church. Catholic means universal. They wanted to create a new universal republican or republic religion. It is interesting how certain individuals like Jacques Hébert, that were atheist, wanted to get rid of religion altogether, but ended up being one of the biggest proponents of the cult of reason, which itself is a religion substitute. It was also intriguing to discover that Maximilien Robespierre was vehemently against atheism, and he even called it aristocratic. Robespierre argued that a supreme being is much more democratic. One of the reasons I am fascinated with this topic of civil religions in the French Revolution is that I'm fascinated with religious history in general, and how the French revolutionaries handled religion was very different than how it was handled in the American Revolution. I am also a Christian, a Catholic as a matter of fact, and it was pretty appalling to see how the French revolutionaries treated the clergy and the nuns from the National Assembly to the Directory. The final point I want to make is why religion at all? Why place authority in religion? A lot of religion boils down to credibility. More importantly, the credibility of enhancing display, which is a tool which helps studiers of religion understand how people can be convinced to commit to a belief system. We are products of our cultural learning environments. When someone of authority tells you something that is real and they practice what they preach on top of it, they have more chances of being believed. These are major themes that historians deal with in the transmitting of religious identity from society to its inhabitants. The Catholic Church was a major factor to this prior to the Revolution. These civil religions are a major factor during the Revolution. Society has a major impact on religion, and these civil religions are a major example of this. I hope you enjoyed this look at civil religions, civil cults in the French Revolution. And you have a wonderful day. If you're interested in me doing more of these sort of videos, please let me know in the comments below.